Welcome to Builders, Budgets, and Beers. I'm Reece Barnes, and I started this podcast to have real conversations about money in the building industry, the wins, the mistakes, and everything in between. I believe builders deserve to feel confident about their finances, and that starts by hearing from others who've been through it too. This industry can be slow to change, but the right stories and the right tools can make profitability feel possible. Let's get into it. Alrighty, Per. Mics are hot. We're rolling.
All right.
Thanks for jumping on the show, on the pod. Super excited about this episode. You're an absolute wealth of knowledge. So everybody who's listening, get out your notepads. But Per, before we jump in, business per usual, give the listeners a little background on Per Pettersson.
Yeah. So from a construction standpoint, we've had our company, we started about 4 years ago as a formal construction company. And we build primarily spec, do a little bit of custom work. I counted up this morning, we've done 24 spec houses over the last 4 years. And then a handful of custom remodels and a couple of new construction. So that's the construction side. Prior to that, grew up around the industry. My dad was developer, did apartments, land development, things like that. As I was growing up, he got out of the business while I was old enough to start working in the business. So my experience learning from him was around our farm and projects and property maintenance, things like that. But prior to construction, formerly I was an analyst, worked in the tech industry. We flipped probably one house a year. And I started to hate sitting behind a desk all day. And dealing with all the meetings that come with large businesses.
Totally.
So started construction company, really saw an opportunity to focus on running a better business. And from that standpoint, like project management clarity, financial clarity. Because what I saw, my wife has an interior design company. What I saw from her working with contractors and then just other people I know that have dealt with it is there's just so much, I'd say lack of information in the industry or just misconceptions on how things work. You ask anybody and they always have a horror story of working with the contractor. They didn't show up on time. I didn't know when they were coming, cost overruns. They didn't tell me what it was going to cost, all those things. And coming out of from an analyst background, information was key and thought about, how we can bring that over into the construction space. So.
Love it. And yeah, I think that was like initially because you are an adaptive customer. Like when it was like, I don't remember this being like a challenging sales cycle in the sense that you were pretty quick to recognize and see the value of adaptive. And then what always stood out to me was like, you basically self-onboarded the product. And I think at that point, that's when I was like, wait, who is this? Like Per, like, and then I was like, I think I looked you up on LinkedIn because you were at Microsoft, weren't you?
Yeah, it was five years at Microsoft, 5 years analytics consulting before that for Microsoft, Costco, some other tech retail companies.
Yeah. So like and that's just like further to your point of like coming from like the analyst background, the tech background, and the opportunity to bring that perspective into building the product that is homes. So I think that's super interesting. One question. So you mentioned that your dad got out of the business as you were entering the business.
Yes.
We don't have to go super in depth in it, but I'm just curious, like, why did your dad jump?
I think he was just wanting to slow down. So everybody joked growing up that my dad was my grandpa. He was 52 when I was born.
Cool.
So he'd been in the business for a while before I came along.
Makes sense.
And so he had started off in residential, working for an uncle when he came over from Sweden back in the 50s. And so
Swedes.
Yeah. Hence the weird name.
Dude, I love it. It's a great name. Go ahead.
So he came over in the 50s, started working for an uncle, got into doing like remodels, then some custom stuff, then a few spec homes, and then got into apartments. And that was his kind of bread and butter, was building apartment complexes. And he built and owned several of those. And then got into land development. And then it just got I think, really difficult on the development side around Seattle area.
Mhm.
And then he kind of hung up the hat on that, kept his apartments, but then got into other business ventures.
Mhm.
And so he wasn't a hands-on contractor. I'd say since probably the late '70s, early '80s. Um, and so he still had commercial properties that I did maintenance on, and then we were always building something around our farm that we grew up on, whether it's adding on to the house, building another barn to put stuff in, whatever it might be.
Totally. Just the
Yeah, that
classics.
yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's so I mean it's like not like he like exited for any other reason than he'd been in the business forever and he was probably ready to enjoy some retirement or
Yeah, well,
more
yeah.
less of a full on retirement. I don't imagine. Probably more.
There was never a retirement there. It was always doing something. But I think the
Yeah.
only downtime he got was he broke his back a couple of times.
Geez, what?
Uh, the little safety plug, wear your harness. He fell off 2 stories off a roof, landed on a stack of lumber, broke his back.
What?
Uh, yeah, yeah. That was the second time. First time was a plane crash, and then third time
What?
was he was 85 and he was like 20 feet up trimming trees and fell off a ladder. So
Holy shit.
yeah,
Okay.
be safe at heights.
Yeah, but also be safe. But also, I mean, those Pettersons are just resilient humans.
Yeah,
You can't
yeah, we bounced back.
keep them away. Yeah, they bounce back. That's right. Okay, cool. So I think, and going back even more into your background, right? You mentioned that you were always kind of handy. Obviously, and this is a tale as old as time. Is like, um, typically people that get into construction have some type of family tie into
Hmm.
construction, right? Your dad's a contractor. You went into the tech world. You came back into construction because you saw the opportunity. Okay. You'd mentioned that you were flipping a house a year effectively
Hmm.
when you were in tech. But what was kind of the launching point for you doing a flip a year and then you gained the conviction to full time send it in construction?
So it'd been probably for about 5 years I was scheming on how I could actually make the switch, because they joke about the golden handcuffs of it's really hard to leave a company
For
like
real.
Microsoft. Um, and so trying to find an exit strategy that made financial sense for the family. Um, and so coming out of COVID, Seattle was growing quite a bit. And actually, a mortgage company that I worked for a number of years, reached back out to them to find out what they were doing on the lending side for construction loans, and found out they actually had stood up a program where they were helping acquire and permit properties and then basically assigning them or selling them to builders or developers to build out. And then they had a financing program set up where they would partner on the deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'd put up a lot of the equity required. You think a typical construction loan at 75% LTV. So, we'd have to come in with 25%, whatever the finished value was, which Seattle market is quite a bit.
Maybe stout.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah. And so they had a separate investor pool where they would partner on that equity portion. And so it cut my cash up front down quite a bit, but still kept a pretty healthy profit share out of the deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so worked with them to try to find the right spec deal. And once I got that locked in, that was really the kind of the starting point to feel confident enough to start doing my own thing. If I just jumped over and started trying to build a business doing remodels and things like that, take quite a while to build back up. Was my
Mm-hmm.
concern.
Mm-hmm.
And so having a pretty solid pipeline of new build projects lined up was really the key.
Yeah. I mean, that's smart. And I think like even more so. So you came out of COVID and then it was like, so you worked in mortgages too?
Yeah, yeah.
Was that like consulting tech or were you like actually in mortgage?
No, so out of college, sold cars for a little bit, and I was terrible at it. Uh,
Hell yeah. Old Per Pettersson, the car
yeah,
salesman. I love it.
and through that met the president of a mortgage company here in the Seattle area, and so got kind of recruited over there to do home loans. Got partnered up with a gal that was really well established in the business, and so worked with her through that financial crisis of 2007, 2008.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Cool.
terrible time to start selling home loans, but made it work.
Yeah.
And so then after about a year and a half of doing that, I was tapped by the CEO to stand up a marketing department, because we'd grown from about 30 to about 300 employees.
Dang.
And so we didn't have any formal marketing department. So I was tapped to kind of found that and kicked that off. And so spent a couple of years doing that. And that's where I realized like the data side of things was huge, and how we could start leveraging that. And so that's where I ended up getting into analytics consulting, and left the mortgage company. And so as that mortgage company, they had restructured over the last, would that be 15 years, and got more onto the construction side of things. And that's how I connected back up with them. So
Got it. Okay, very cool. I had no idea. That's a cool part of your story. And even then, okay, so it's like there's just like kind of this trend of like a stronger business acumen in your journey,
yeah,
right? Like selling cars, like for sure. I think that's like just selling anything is like a pretty like normal way for business people to get into the business world. Going into mortgages, learning that, understanding that 2007, 2008, really hard to sell stuff there. Then you get tapped to do marketing. Then you go on your own and lean into the data analytics side, consult there, work for Microsoft. Then you reach back out to the mortgage company, and that's when you find the conviction to actually go into speccing homes full time.
yeah.
What did that? Yeah, for sure, definitely full circle. I think generally, like just going back into the opportunity that you saw to bring more, call it business acumen to this vertical or business lane being construction. What were some of like the glaring opportunities that you saw initially, like call it on your first spec or like right when you entered?
I'd say the biggest one on the project management side, just as I talked to other builders and looked at projects, and you drive around town and you see what projects are taken, when they started, how they're moving along. Realize the project management side I felt you could do a lot better than what a lot of folks were, or a lot of builders were doing. Not to knock any builders, but I think there's some that definitely run projects smoother than others. And so with that first spec deal, I'd been doing, some little remodels at the same time. You get in for a week into somebody's house and do something. But on the spec side, it was just project planning up front, getting all the bids together, matching that up with the budget and the pro forma that you have for the project to make sure, is this thing actually going to pencil out? But also just getting everybody lined up. I don't know, if last week, a couple episodes ago, somebody was on talking about, setting project schedules and how they just kind of go out the window. I forget who that was. Great episode. But, and, while that's true, I think the key there is just making sure everything's sequenced in the right aspect, and you're not creating either bottlenecks or large gaps in the project. And so, especially coming out of COVID, material supply was tough. The supply chain was kind of a
Shot.
mess. And so I really saw the opportunity to really plan the projects up front, figure out when we need everything, who's coming when, so that we're getting the project done in as quick as time as possible. But also when you factor in things like interest carry, like these projects get really expensive really quick if you don't run them as efficiently as possible. And so then trying to find the balance of, we obviously don't want to cut corners and, build an inferior product by trying to move too fast. But just going back to your question, I think the real opportunity was just running it in a really well organized manner, rather than scratching out on paper, what happens when, calling the guy a week before framing starts and asking my framer, hey, do you have time to start next week? It's like, had I given them a month's head up and they said, no, we got projects that are coming up, we can't start till this date, gives me time to pivot and find another crew, do whatever I need to do, to really make sure it stays on track. And so that kind of dovetails in the financial side. But I think the initial one was really just the project management.
I mean, dude, project management and financials go hand in hand. I just did a post on LinkedIn effectively about that, and how that relates into the client experience. I digress. Why is it like, okay, contractor, well, raised by a contractor, flipper on the side of a tech analytical professional career, jumps into specs, recognizing the opportunity of, call it effective scheduling, right, and project management. How can somebody with calling a spade, such little construction experience, like fully committed construction experience, recognize that opportunity and execute on it. And then you've got project managers and business owners that have decades of fully committed experience just totally getting owned by scheduling and getting subs lined up.
Yeah.
How? I don't get it, because like to me it sounds like it's like, again, the guy that's like, I'm not a builder, right? Like my dad was a builder. I don't have any interest being bags on, like that type of thing. But I just don't get it, because you hear story after story after story of a project manager calling a sub, beating him up like, God damn it, I need you here at this time and you're going to be here. And it's just like, well, what if you just organized it better? What is the disconnect?
No, that's a really good question. I haven't really given much thought to it, but I'd say one aspect, just outside looking in, it's, I came into it without that, hardcore construction experience, like you said. And so I had to rely on, the other skills that I had, which was running a project, tracking the numbers, just organizing it. And so I had to lean in pretty heavy on the project planning side to make sure, I wasn't missing things. I didn't miss inspections. I had all the trades lined up. And so I think that kind of kicked me off from a good start. And I don't know, I can't speak to the other side of, the 20-year veteran that's struggling to make the transition or run more effectively. But I think it's hard to get out of old habits, and it's really easy to get mired down in the day to day of, especially if you're, a smaller company and, you're on site managing the subs, doing everything. And then it's like, oh crap, I got to look ahead 2 weeks and figure that out. What's coming up? What do I need to order? Like it is a juggle. But I think it's being diligent in time management to make sure, I'm setting aside that, half an hour to an hour every day to check on the schedule, make sure it's updated, think about what's coming up. But also at the start of the project, I do this on our custom ones, is I go in and build out the entire schedule before we even start. And so, yes, it's going to go to hell. It's, the plumber's going to call and say, hey, we can't start this date, and I got to bring somebody else in while the plumber is supposed to be there. And, it's a cascade of issues. But at least it gives that good starting point at the onset of the project. Now I'm just, throughout it, I'm making tweaks. I'm not trying to kind of build the ship or build the plane as we're flying it. So it gives me a good foundation. And I think also, coming in without the long-term construction experience, like I had to spend a lot of time on project management in my other roles. And so I approached it like, it's no different than, building a software feature or anything else. There's a set of folks that have to be involved. There's a set of steps that have to take place. Just get those things lined up. And obviously there's, the quality control and you got to walk the site and talk to the subs and do all your setup meetings and your planning and everything like that. So that part's different. But at the end of the day, it's, no different than building anything else or running any other project. That's why, if you look at like a Gantt chart, they look exactly the same, whether it's construction or software or, really any other business, because it's just a set of steps, one after the other.
Totally. I think and I literally just did an episode. Do you know Paul Atherton at Highspire?
Mm-mm.
Do you know you never heard of Highspire?
I have not.
Basically, they're like a business consulting, a construction specific business consulting group, heavily emphasizing on like scalability, raising capital, that type of thing. I think you'd actually like talking to Paul. So if you want to intro, let me know. But point being, we were talking about basically builders getting out of the way and out of their own way rather, and grasping the identity that is required to go from being in the field bags on to the business owner identity. Right. And I think that's a lot of like what my takeaway was, is like, of course you have a background in like product management, project management, the similarities between the two, almost it being an advantage of you not having all the years of experience and getting sucked into the minutia of the day to day that is building a home. Not to say that you aren't involved, but you were at least able to come in with a perspective and place an importance and emphasis on the project management side. That I think a lot of builders struggle with. And I think that primarily is chalked up to where am I comfortable as a professional? And it's really easy to get sucked into the day to day of managing the project, bags on the project, and not prioritizing that
Oh yeah.
the project management.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I mean, I still put the bags on a fair amount, and like we do all our own in-house carpentry, and
Hmm.
just because I got tired of. I started off that way, went back to subs for all the finish work. Now we have full-time carpenters that are doing that, and there's probably at least a day a week where I'm bags on, so to speak,
Hmm.
working the field, and it's tough to separate that because that's fun, and it's enjoyable, and you can see at the end of the day you can see your progress, whether it's hey, I framed up a wall, we got that set of cabinets installed, whatever it might be. You go home at the end of the day and it's a very tangible output that you have.
Hmm.
Whereas, managing the business, it's not very tangible, and it's, at the end of the day, at the end of the week, it's okay, great. I have a cool looking schedule and I made, 200 phone calls, but
Right.
it's not that same feeling as creating something. And to your point of like stepping out of that, bags on, I think that psychological aspect is really tough. Because you're going from a tangible to an intangible kind of result.
Totally.
And that was one of the reasons I got fed up with the corporate thing, because there was no tangible result.
I was
Um,
just going to say that. Go ahead.
yeah.
It was like the entire intention for you leaving Microsoft was because you were tired of sitting behind a screen.
Yeah.
Right.
And I loved working on projects, but in order to
Hmm.
make it a sustainable business, I had to find the right balance of keeping up the business, computer work, so to speak,
Hmm.
um, and actually working out in the field, and strike a balance between that to make it make sense.
Totally. Totally. Okay. No, this is great. You mentioned on the back end of like the importance of project management and how that is like a direct run into like tracking project financials.
Hmm.
Where did you start to see like project management improvement or project management slippage impact financials?
I mean,
What were some of those big glaring opportunities? Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, the big one on the spec side of our business is like interest carry, because the longer it takes,
Yeah.
we're looking at projects that are, you know, 800 to $1,000 a day in interest.
Mhm.
Like that
Wait,
adds
wait,
up
wait,
real
wait.
quick.
800 to 1,000 a day on interest carry.
Yeah.
What's the loan amount on that?
So the largest,
75%.
what's that?
Isn't it 75% is on loan?
75, and then with other investors, we're paying interest on their money as well.
Got it.
Um,
Sure.
and so yeah, we're up $5-6 million on some of the loans.
Dang.
Like we've done a couple of 12-unit project, or sorry, a couple of 6-unit projects concurrently, 12 units at a time. That was a grind. But yeah, so on the bigger ones, that's where the interest carry becomes a really big factor. Um, and so that one's just a speed aspect. The quicker you get it done and on the market, the less you pay in interest. I'd say the other ones that are kind of smaller, but it's ordering materials. If you order, say I need my millwork pack, my doors, my baseboards, all that stuff. If I wait until the last minute, either I'm paying a rush fee, I'm not able to shop suppliers, I don't have time to negotiate, and so it might only be 5%, 10% difference on a $10,000 line item,
Hmm.
but you do a bunch of those and it adds up. And so the or the management side of it, having that lead time and leeway to look at different options and figure out different solutions, is huge.
Hmm.
But also just so that's the material side, but on the kind of process side of things, really thinking through, who's coming first, what aspect of the build are we doing at what time, how does that help save money throughout the course of it, whether, I can, on multi-unit projects, I can, get drywall stock before we do rough-ins, because if I wait, I can't get a drywall lift in there, and I have to hand pack in drywall up 3 stories because now there's another building in the way. So just things like that. I mean, we're able to save a little bit of money here and there by thinking through, all the steps of the process.
Beautiful. How long did it take for you to get to that standpoint? Because I think like I think I'm picking up what you're putting down with the drywall example. Basically,
Mhm.
it's like we've got to get material up to the unit that we're drywalling, and we can't explain that a little bit more.
Oh yeah.
I'm envisioning like some type of boom lift,
I know
right?
it.
It's like
Yeah, I think
we
it
put the
makes more
material
sense
on a.
in the denser area where we're building some of our projects. So um, a lot of the new construction that we're doing is considered infill development. So we're taking an existing lot in Seattle area,
Mhm,
or general area, but an existing residential lot, tearing it down, building 2-3 houses in its place,
mhm,
and so site access becomes really tricky.
mhm,
And we might have a site where one unit is back behind the other one without an alley, without street access, without anything, and so by the time the ones go up in front of it, we can't get any equipment to the ones in back.
mhm,
And so, after the first project of doing that, and I kind of boxed myself in, uh, I had to really rethink how we approach or how we stagger out the trades and deliveries and things like that to make sure, we can keep it moving as quick as we possible, but we don't exclude the ability to use equipment and speed things along. And so, like the drywall example, we had one project where the lift would reach the building, but if I finished framing the house in front, I couldn't reach it. So, like once I
mhm,
got the house in front up to the first story, I could still reach over the top of it to get to the one in back. Um, and so we scramble, get the roof on, get the house papered, get all the drywall delivered. So we pause framing for a couple of days, get all the drywall in, and then go back to framing the front one. Um, and so that way we can, we're reaching over houses, reaching around houses, to get things done. Yeah, trying to reach around over with deliveries with, sometimes it's paint. We're building 5 feet off a property line, and so I got to think of how can I get a lift in or get ladders in for the painters so they can do their job efficiently.
mhm,
And so just a lot of those little things that if I were to take a more traditional approach of like, we're just going to frame the whole thing, then I'm going to
mhm.
get the plumbers in for the whole thing. You would miss out on some of those opportunities.
Yeah. Okay. So no, and that makes total sense. And that's where the project management and the financials go hand in hand for sure. Cause it's like you're sitting there on like call it like a first project and you aren't thinking about this stuff, which I think there's a lot of builders out there that are intrigued by spec building, right?
Hmm.
And if you're not thinking that many steps ahead, it gets really expensive really quickly.
Yeah.
So I think that like you just explaining that is helpful because I think when you are going into a spec build, really the pressure is coming from like the interest, right?
Oh yeah.
And like how fast can I get this thing off my books and
Well,
like
yeah, and then so
making
that,
money.
and then thinking through of like, okay, if I'm delayed a month, well, now the house is coming on the market in Thanksgiving, which it's nobody shopping at Thanksgiving, Christmas time, so that mad scramble of getting it done, hitting your financial targets, but then getting it on the market at a time that the market's receptive to shopping, essentially. And so
Totally.
then, yeah, and so then
Okay.
on the custom side, 'cause clients really like that management aspect, 'cause they know what's happening when, and
Totally. Okay. So even in terms of okay, so the project management is a huge win. Um, you had mentioned like playing this into the financial side. What opportunities did you see to run a construction company better from like a financial process? We understand the project management wins. We understand how that starts to like bleed into the financials. But what was the financial opportunity? Call it like the financial ops opportunity.
so it kind of kicked off with, so my wife has an interior design company, and her working on projects and just getting upset because a lot of the design aspect comes into play at the end of a project, right? Like that's when you're installing the tile, the light fixtures, the plumbing fixtures, the furniture, everything.
Hmm.
And so seeing those budgets get cut from her because the projects were coming in over budget, um, just made me think of like, why are these things coming in over budget, and then you're having to cut corners at the end of a project? And that had nothing to do with spec.
Yeah.
That was on the custom side. Um, but just trying to think like, why is this happening? And talking, friends, acquaintances, things like that have had projects. It came down to poor financial planning, and then poor communication throughout the project was kind of the crux of it. And to oversimplify it, it's like we didn't know where our money was going, um, and I blame that 100% on the contractor. Uh, it's
Yeah.
not the customer's fault. A customer might build, you know, remodel, new build, whatever it might be, might do, one, two, three in a lifetime. And as builders,
Yeah.
we're doing, multiple a year. We're the experts on how that runs and what's it going to cost. And so the excuse of, hey, it costs more than we thought. I get that to a certain extent. 5-10% makes sense. But when you hear people that are cutting out their dreams because now we can't afford the nice fixtures that we wanted, or we had to tap into our savings because we didn't know it was going to cost 20-30% more than we were quoted. Like it was a big opportunity to be, I'd say, more kind of honest and upfront with customers on what was happening. And so from an operation standpoint for me, it was, okay, how can we, and I didn't really understand cost coding and all those things before I got into the business. But just from
I
an
want to
outside,
touch on that, but keep going.
okay.
Just so you know, I want to touch on that,
From
but
an
keep
outsider's
going.
perspective, it's like, I need to know where all the costs are going. And then working on that first bank budget, it's like, okay, I need to be able to say, how much am I spending on foundations? How much am I spending on lumber and millwork and finished carpentry and all those things? And it only made sense that if I have to say how much or draw against these expenses, I better be able to figure out what it's going to cost me across all these categories.
Mm-hmm.
And the bank is a lot less flexible than going to a customer whose house is torn apart and saying, "Hey, I need $10,000, another 10 grand, or I'm not going to be able to finish your house." If you go to the bank and say, "I got, I need another 10, 50, 100 grand," like, it is a mountain of paperwork that you got to go through to justify that cost.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, organizing the financials in such a way on a project from the bidding standpoint all the way through to completion was, appeared to be a huge opportunity. And then, taking on that first spec project where it was, kind of bit blank slate. Here are the plans. Here's the site. What's it going to cost to build it? I had to do a lot across all the cost codes and figure out, every step of the way what this thing's going to cost.
Totally. The point, and that's great, because I mean, frankly, like, that was the motivation to build Adaptive.
Mm-hmm.
Was our co-founders, they were working with spec builders, infill spec builders down in Austin.
Okay.
And they were initially going to build a tool for like speculative builders to like identify the most ideal lots
Oh, that's
in
right.
Austin. Yeah. And then they like quickly found out that there wasn't like a huge total addressable market for it, like not enough spec builders effectively to sell it to, or build that product. But as they were working with these builders, they started to like understand, like, okay, what's preventing you guys from like scaling or getting financing on this? And then they started looking at books, and they're like, all their books were a total mess. And like,
Oh, yeah.
they couldn't paint that financial picture for banks to have conviction to lend
Yeah,
them
when you
money.
have you
Or
have three cost codes of labor, materials, and subs, it's there's not the financial clarity that a bank's going to want to see.
Totally. And I think the financial clarity, and like, you bring up cost codes again, and you'd mentioned like at the beginning you didn't quite understand cost codes. Again, I'm not a builder, nor am I a CPA. I've just been working with builders for like almost 10 years when it comes to construction software, call it. What was the learning curve for you, or what was the difficulty in understanding cost codes for you?
It made a heck of a lot of sense.
Okay,
so,
so it did make sense.
oh yeah, it made sense right away. I just never encountered because I'd had other little businesses over the years that I'd spun up just as side projects, and had to
Mhm.
kind of do the accounting on. But yeah, starting my company, like, I had to stand up QuickBooks. I had to figure out how to organize that. I had to, do the whole thing. And so that's where I, started researching the, just construction financing in general, and cost codes kept coming up. And then you see the whole big list of the, what is it, nine, um, the nine cost groups and everything. And there's
Yeah, like the
hundreds of
division
cost
codes
codes.
and stuff.
Yeah. yeah, the nine, hundreds and hundreds of cost codes. I'm like, geez, this seems way too much. And so that's where I started thinking through, basically just looking at the steps of the project and being like, okay, we have all our dirt work, we have all our rough construction, we have utilities, and start putting together a list that made sense. And really that aligned with the bank draws, the bank budgets that they wanted to see. And that was the starting point for it. But for me, it just made a lot of sense. And I've definitely refined them over the years. Like I used to have, for each cost code, I had materials and labor and subcontractors. And that was, it became too much to try to enter all that information in. And so I had to find the right balance of what gives me, enough clarity to understand where I'm, how projects are running, where I'm going over, where I'm going under, where I can improve, but also not make it so cumbersome that when I'm entering it in, like it's the right thing. Because you can definitely go overboard on the cost codes, and
Totally.
then things aren't getting categorized the right way. Because like for instance, we have framing material. That's my lumber. That's my hardware. And you see some guys that break it out into 4 or 5 different cost codes, or the same thing for foundations. It's like, okay, there's concrete, there's rebar, there's labor, there's all these other aspects of it. And I get a bill from my a sub, and it's they don't break it out. So how the heck am I going to break it out into those different things? So I just had to simplify to the point that it made that I could track it, or input it properly, but also gave me the clarity. And so yeah, just circling back on your question, like how did it work getting stuff up on it? It's like, I just had to find a way that I could align my books with what I wanted to do, which was provide enough financial clarity for myself, the business, the bank, and ultimately customers on the custom side that, that made sense and they felt comfortable with.
Totally. I think this like cost code topic is, I mean, to your point, it's a tale as old as time. People making cost codes something that they're not. And they're like, well, I want to use cost codes and I want to know what the cost of every board is, and how much do I spend on 2x4s and how much do I spend on rebar. It's like, that's not really the point of cost codes. And to your point, if you get cost code bloat, you're not going to use them consistently. It's not going to paint the picture that you think it is. And really the entire goal of cost codes is for you to understand more of the progression, the costs and the income of the progression of the project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I use it. Yeah. And I use it quite a bit on, on the kind of the flip side of that, on estimating out the next project, because, I don't go down and do takeoffs at the material level for framing and siding and all that. But each project's different. So it doesn't matter, if I spend, $5,000 on engineered lumber on one job, that's not going to easily translate over to 5,000 of engineered lumber on the next job. Depending, it's going to be a completely different build, engineered differently. I just need to know, what am I paying my lumber supplier for, per square foot, and that average carries over. But at an individual material type level, it doesn't matter. Now if I was, say if I was my siding supplier or my siding sub and I was running, their books, yeah, it's going to matter how many nails I use and, how much flashing I use, things like that. But at my level, kind of combining all those costs together, I just need to know what the siding costs. And then I can tweak it, if we're going up a level or using a little nicer material or something like that, can make adjustments, but I have that base cost at a fine enough level that we can track the project, but I can also kind of bid out and project out the next project. And then understand, okay, that's this level of finish. And then I can make adjustments from there.
Totally. I guess, and this is just might be a side comment, but I am curious, just with your background in tech, like you see software products out there that will go down to like the item level of tracking, right? It's like in Buildertrend, there's like the cost catalog, job tread. They have like a third level of categorization.
Oh yeah.
Plumbing. Why?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait, are you a job tread guy, or you're a Resio guy, aren't you?
I finally landed on Resio.
Or what do you use for
a long history of trying other ones.
Okay, cool. But to that point, like why? why are software companies doing it? I understand it from like a sales standpoint, like it's really easy and fun to sell, but then what's the
Yeah.
application of it? What value does it actually bring to the builder?
I could see if you do a high volume of smaller projects where you miss a shower valve on a bathroom remodel. That's a lot, larger percentage of the cost than missing a shower valve on a full new construction house. Um, and so if you're doing, if your bread and butter is say bathroom remodels or kitchen remodels, I could see a world in which that granularity makes sense. Um, but at the scale of projects that we're doing, I just don't like it doesn't matter. Like I need to look at aggregate costs of across categories, not the minutia of every little detail. And I could be wrong on that. But I mean that's my guess.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and also some people, I saw this happen in over the years in different roles where folks that feel or that are busy counting something, doing something, making something, whether it's, hey, I made the most detailed estimate I have ever made and it took me 10 hours. They're going to feel really productive for those 10 hours. But really,
Mm.
if you was that was that activity worth the effort at the end of the day, or was it just busy work? Um, and I saw that like on the marketing side when I was working at a mortgage company, we'd have loan officers that would go out and spend hours and hours and hours making these flyers, and they come to me and say, "Hey, Per, can you sign off on this? Can marketing sign off on this? I just made the best flyer ever for this open house." I'm like, well, how much time did you spend doing that? Oh, I spent all day doing it, and I had to go get the photos, and I cropped them just right, and I did all this stuff. I'm like, you could have gone out and met, had lunch with a realtor and followed up on 3 leads during that time. Like it was a wasted effort, but they felt really busy, and so they thought they were doing something really good. Um,
Totally.
and I could see that playing a factor. You make a extremely detailed estimate, and you feel really good about it, but were you any more accurate than if you took some larger swings and made some broader assumptions? Probably not. Maybe it was 2-3% better, or closer to the pin. But in the grand scheme of things, was that was that the best use of your time?
Totally. That was frankly like going to be my comment towards even like call it the kitchen and bathroom modeler that's trying to go like down to the screw on an estimate. And it's like, but like while that might be a bigger hit on like a plumbing fixture, like even when you consider the time that goes into building out these catalogs and these products and like trying to leverage them in a way that's going to be beneficial, like can you really afford to be doing that?
No. I mean, I tried to. I the first product I had, it was Builder Trend. The first one I had, and it was they were selling the cost catalog, and
Yeah.
I started to go down that path of starting to enter products in. It's like this is absolutely ridiculous. Like I'm going to spend weeks trying to enter in all the different permutations of products that I might use, materials that I might use, and it's going to go out the window in 6 months when all these prices get changed.
1000%. Then you're updating that. It's just like,
Yeah, and
yeah.
you'd have to have a full-time person just trying to keep track of all that to make it make any sense.
The expensive part of software is not the cost of the software. The expensive part of software is the cost of the overhead that it takes to maintain that software in order to see value.
I'm going to put that on a plaque.
I've sold a lot of software.
Yeah.
It's the truth. It's the truth. And like I think a lot of builders are blinded, and that's why I mentioned like these like those features, and frankly like a lot of these products, they can be fun to sell because the idea of them is incredible. It's like, God, I could do all this stuff in there, and this could help me do this and that. I could get down to the penny on this, and it's like, but you're not considering the $40,000-$50,000 a year person that you should have in that seat. And if it's not a singular person, there's going to be $40,000 or $50,000 in man hours.
Oh yeah,
keeping it up to date across the team, right? So where to your point is like, is this the best use of time? I was talking to another builder just recently down in the South Shore of Boston, and he was like, dude, I just need something to like help me keep on track. Like I need like a project management software or something like that. And I was like, okay, well, like what is your actual problem? He's like, I need like my phone is like blowing up with text and there's documents getting sent to me and like organizing all of this. And I'm like, okay, well, this is a one-man show. And he's doing like 3 specs a year, right? And like all the information is already there. And is the best move for him to go in and then like start just translating data into these like types of software? I don't know, maybe. But when you think about the application of it, it's like, dude, you're gonna need to get an admin, some like for this truly to take time off your plate. You're gonna need to get someone that's gonna be doing this translating for you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And those are, getting back to financially, those are indirect costs. So if you look at you might improve the profitability of a single project because now your costs are just a little bit better. And so at a project level, your margins might get a little better. But now you added in a person's $50,000, and that's not going to direct costs. So depending on how you manage the P&L, like it's going to crush your business unless you're making up for that somewhere else. You're going to have to increase your margin so much, and it might make sense and it might work, but is it worth that extra cost? So
it's the effective time spend conversation. Yeah. And frankly, like that's like kind of a good way to wrap up the conversation, which was like project management impacting financials and you seeing the opportunities to win in this business. Yeah, no, Per, I think this was great. We had started this recording. I appreciate you hopping on because I think you're a wealth of knowledge. For everyone out there, if you want to find Per, his construction company is called Linmac. Is it Linmac Construction?
Linmac Constructions, Linmak.
Yeah, check out Per's website. He actually he's done a webinar with us talking about labor, tracking labor. So that's going to be in our help center online. But Per, I appreciate you, like I mentioned, jumping on. Do you have any words of wisdom that you would leave builders with, more so than you've already provided?
I don't. There's so many people in this industry that have so much more experience than I do, and I definitely try to learn as much as I can from them and the podcast and that. So, my little bit though, I'd say it's just run great projects, manage projects well. Like as an industry, we have such a bad reputation. There's so many great builders out there, and it's not a bad industry. And but you just hear so many horror stories. Like run good projects, be upfront with customers, be honest with customers, and I think the more planning that can be done, and the better the communication is, like it's just going to up level all of us. And so that's just spending more time and effort doing that, I think is huge. And if you don't know, like learn how to. There's so many resources out there to on project management. You don't have to go to some course or construction management program to do it. Like there's some great tutorials out there and great info.
This being one of them. This is now adding to the great resources that are available. I love it. Per, you're awesome. Thank you for coming on for the third time. Again, I need to work on this like Midwestern goodbye. It's like Midwestern people. And like they say bye and then they start talking again.
Yeah, you just keep coming back. Keep coming back.
I know. I'm terrible at this. I can't get away from my roots. Have a great rest of your week. Excited to get this one released for the audience. And as always, if there's anything we can do, don't hesitate to reach out.
Sounds great. Thanks, Reece. Take care.
Awesome. See you, Per.